Ah, Salzburg, and the modern cliche of bridge padlocking. I wonder how many of these relationships are still going, or broken up, or in any way affected by these padlocks. I know it's just like harmless fun and romance, but we are quite, what's the word, superstitious. And that, cause this follows on superstition, doesn't it? Somehow doing something, placing an inanimate object on a bridge is going to somehow make a difference in our life. Just want to point that out. Not very original. It's like, you get the one in Paris. There's actually quite a few I've seen around the place. I think I saw one in Lithuania as well. Anyway, it's a beautiful city, this. And one thing I noticed everywhere, is anarchy signs. Same as in Munich. I wonder if it's real anarchy or fake anarchy. I mean, when I say fake anarchy, the one that's the one that the government gave the news companies to splash in our face for the past 100 years, saying it meant chaos, instead of actual, grassroots organization of community, which is what it actually means. It doesn't necessarily mean no government. It just means that you govern yourselves. It just means that the best man for the job, or best people for the job, persons, multiple. Let's see, an example that was given, and to be honest with you, it was actually my only, when I first started looking into anarchy and panarchy, actually, the only question I had was, how will they do the fires? But the thing is, of course, there's a fire going over there right now. Oh no, maybe it's a power station. Yeah, of course, the community would put together and make sure someone had the resources, or some people had the resources, so when a fire happened, you would do that thing. My friend was saying, brought up the same argument yesterday, because I was having a discussion with his son about all different things. What red pill means, why people are using it incorrectly, because he was saying in his age group that's what's happening, and and how language always gets appropriated, misused, fucked up, because people just don't simply understand what things are used for. And also because the other side of it is things get censored. You can no longer use words. I said, like, retard, for example, you're not allowed to use it. Learning disabled, in time that will just become offensive, so you won't be able to say learning disabled. What's the point? Just stop changing language. It literally is pointless. We need to get on top of basically people being assholes to each other and people being offended at everything. Those two problems they're the issues, not anything else. Anyway, so the fire department situation and the roading, I really believe the roading wouldn't be required, I said yesterday, because if you didn't have the hindrance of government, and before the government, the church and the mosque, the synagogue, whatever, the heads of state, and before that the emperor and the king, it's all the same thing. It really is no different. They're all self-serving, parasitic entities and power structures, right? If you didn't have those, we would really, and this is not a joke, we would not need roads. Like Back to the Future. The reason you wouldn't need roads is because the ridiculous level of technological hindrance that governments, churches, emperors, all that sort of stuff have imposed upon the human race. I gave an example of burning Copernicus for saying the world was round, which is still in many people's eyes still a theory. I don't really care. It's a distraction as well, that whole bullshit. Whether it's donut shaped or flying saucer shaped, it doesn't actually matter a shit. It's here, and even if it's not here and it's a simulation, this is what we have. So it's all a distraction, right? Work with what you have. Like, let's say for example this is a simulation. Well, wouldn't you still want to play the game or the best you could? Because this is specifically all you have, until you find out that something else, let's say the Matrix kind of thing exists. Well, until you find out that happens, you still want to set your mind free and live the best, most possible way you can in life, Anyway, the fire. Getting back to the fire department thing. For a start, it wouldn't be. He was saying that you might not have enough fires, and people would just be waiting around for a fire. They wouldn't be prepared. Not true, because what you'd again have is a situation where you probably would have more fire retardant buildings in the first place. But let's get that aside. People's only job wouldn't be fire. That would be you'd be a guy who'd be used, let's say, for security possibly, and fire, and something else. But in the rest of your time, you'd be pretty much doing nothing. You shouldn't be working more than 3 days a week if you add up all your time, and it should be more, freelance. Whenever something comes along, you do the work. You know, when you need to build a shed in your garden, or your neighbour needs one, you're going to help them out. You know, that's more of what it would be like in an anarchistic society. It wouldn't be doing 9 to 5. That's the slave. See, people are so, they're so accustomed to living in slave society. They don't realize that with the technologies we have that have given us no more free time in the last 100 years, we would have more free time. Because the whole thing is, we're all giving the same amount of time as we ever were before all of these mechanization solutions existed, whether it be robotic or whether it be, you know, algorithmic, computer program, whatever it may be. They're not giving the average person more time. They're taking more off them and giving less money for the time that, when I say less money, they're giving them less reward for the time they're putting in. This is again why we're living in a slave society. There is absolutely nothing the government's required for. But the problem that my friend's son brought up was that he was saying that he just doesn't like the fact that if there was a collapse of government, there would be a lot of death and everything. And I had to explain to him the end result of what all kind of hegemonic or the kleptocracy we have right now in control, no matter what it is, when they're left unchecked, monarchies, everything else, every power structure, when left unchecked, leads to an inevitable abuse of power and a state where they effectively hoard all the capital and leave the people with nothing. Now, if you can apply that same historical fact to modern day, where we're having robotic police, Boston Dynamics and all these companies creating the stuff, this is happening. And then you look at all the other thing where you have automation, which is taking away jobs, and it's not bringing more. Don't believe that bullshit. It's not true. If it was bringing more, you wouldn't have people doing job sharing and 0-hour contracts. It's a complete fucking lie, right? It's not creating more jobs. It's taking away jobs, obviously. And the last two jobs that I believe will be left from previous discussions on this and with other people are nurses and teachers of our kids. Maybe not even teachers when you get older, only when you're a child, for the human contact element, and then probably nurses will probably last the longest because of the bedside manner, that kind of stuff. Doctors are gone first. Surgeons and doctors, that you're dealing with not necessarily the need to have bedside manner or doctor. It's the need to diagnose. There's a need to do operations, and both of those things can be done fairly easy with having access to large volumes of data. Probably better than a doctor could do in time when you start to get trend analysis of lots of data sets, and it tunes itself to give more accurate results. These things are fucking obvious that are going to happen, right? They're already happening. And if you maintain capitalism, that just ends up with less and less people with all the money, and the majority without the ability to pay for homes, own anything, own any capital. This is again happening right now, especially when the banks continue to give easy ways into getting mortgages, so the people plumb all the money into a place they can't really afford, and then they manipulate the interest rates up every 7 to 10 years so that let's say a percentage of people lose their houses, and then rinse and repeat, same as the stock market with the algorithmic bots, human emotion algorithm armed bots trading against human beings. Of course human beings are going to lose. That's what's happening. The whole thing is continual movement of capital to the hands of a few. Now, we have seen this before, the Roman Empire. We've seen it, the clipping of coins of the Roman Empire. We've seen it with the French Revolution. It's going to continually happen because it's human nature. So if you don't get rid of government now, what you're facing is, in my opinion, somewhere somewhere 80% plus of the human population being wiped out, because in 2 generations, or even just 1 generation, of seeing a bunch of people around on the street shitting around because they've got nowhere to shit, you know what I mean? This is the inevitabilities, right? Once you have that for a while, it'll switch from, and this is the example I've used in the past, "Oh daddy, help that poor man," to, "Oh daddy, exterminate that man." And that honestly was what will happen, because we've been there before. We've done all these things before. We don't change. Human nature doesn't change. We still stay the same. You apply certain things, you make people feel better than other people, and that's inevitably what happens. You create a rift between, you look at the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda, for example. That's white people coming along, separating good-looking Africans from ugly Africans, and then them believing that's actually a thing, and they're becoming 2 tribes. Good-looking tribe of the ones who obviously got slaughtered when the genocide started. Same thing, and you can see countless examples of this. So I'm not going to even. Well, look, if anyone asks questions about it, of course I'm going to give you a bunch of examples. I can't be bothered fishing them out right now. I'm just telling you there are plenty. I gave you one. There are plenty more. Actually, I gave you a couple. But yes, the reason there are these examples, and you can find more of them, and you will always find more, is because human nature will not change until we kind of advance, and that will not be done under the yoke and oppression of governments around the world, who literally are there to ensure their own existence. The same way a parasite mutates to fight an antibiotic, the same way the system fights against us to maintain its control. But the problem is, with all parasites, they end up killing the host. And that's about it, really. They don't have any checks on themselves, and eventually what they do is they do effectively strangle the very thing that's feeding them, and then by default they actually exterminate themselves. That's the nature of a parasite, and that's the nature of all governments. Unfortunately, it's just the truth. So to say you don't want to change things because you don't want disruption or chaos that would lead up to an organized anarchy, it really is short-sighted, because what you're really doing is just prolonging the inevitable and ensuring that instead of just effectively the survival of the fittest, what you're effectively going to do is have survival of no one. And you're going to have mass genocide and horrible things happen later on, because government will have total control. They may survive it, because if you think about it, you take every human away, and you've got robots doing all the agriculture, all this infinite space. You've got probably robots turning down the nuclear power stations that are no longer required, so they don't end up blowing up and making the world effectively completely scorched and unlivable. They could actually do it. Just it's a slow implementation of robots. Oh my God, what's happening right now? So anyway, think about that. It's this stuff's all really obvious, but then again, it obviously isn't to most people, because I have to explain it to people. Again, give your comments as far as if you really believe there's anything we need government for. Give me it in your comments. I'll explain to you exactly why it's not true. And the thing is, if you come up with a better argument than me, I'll of course listen to it. Because here's the thing. You can argue in bullshit, baffling brains all day, right? But the simple fact is, if you give a strong argument against a weaker argument, only a complete Gwynlin, a complete moron, a brain moron, cannot take those two arguments and say, well, you know what, you've obviously got a stronger point here. Because it's not emotional based bullshit, right? It's logic when you're talking about arguments. One argument trumps another. That's end of story, So you give an argument of why something's needed. I explain exactly why it's not. So for example, the road argument. Well, we already have roads, and they could be maintained. You could have companies like there was an example recently of I think it was Domino's patching up things. That's just an example of maintenance, right? People would want things done. Now, of course, it might make for a very ugly world, but that's just an example there. Again, I believe that governments, we already know we can have flying cars, we've already got drone technology, we can make human-sized drones. I really believe that the only reason we're not flying around right now is because governments don't want to give us the freedom. We can move marijuana and all sorts of drugs or weaponry between borders, be a lot more difficult to police. That's what it comes down to. Their job gets more difficult, and here's the real clincher here, right? It's not about their job just getting more difficult. It's about the fact that when the job gets so difficult they can't do it, the obvious becomes apparent. What are you guys doing? You're just wasting your time. Why are you wasting your time and our money wasting your time? That's what they don't want. That eureka moment where people wake up to the fact that, hang on, why do we even need them? You know, this is the fear of the government, being seen as the complete useless, cancerous waste of time that it actually is. And so these are some of the arguments actually I have with libertarians who believe in a minimal government, unlike panarchists and anarchists who don't believe in any government at all. They say that's that extra push. For fuck's sakes, my dog's having the third shit today. All right. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. See you later.